people coming into the profession,
Mhm.
a lot of people listening to this are thinking of coming in, or they're in the training. What advice would you give people?
So many things I could say. Talk to people. I mean, listen to podcasts like this. Read as much as you can. If you're not ready to start a full training, go and do an intro course. Maybe go and do some voluntary work. Feel your way into it. Get a sense of what it's like. And I mean, I don't think it's possible to rush it. So if I say don't rush it, it's inevitable anyway. But take your time with it, and really maybe pay attention to what it's like for you to do it.
Hmm.
I think the thing I've realized is it's not that you're going to just take in a certain amount of information. You're in a way you're there to kind of grow into a role as a therapist, and
Yeah.
that takes personal growth as well, and it doesn't stop. I think that's the other thing I would say is don't expect that
Mm.
to stop. In a way, doing a training is really just the first part of that.
Sure.
And you're going to continue growing as you start doing the work, and
Hmm.
developing as a therapist or counselor, and all that stuff we talked about before, which is sort of finding your own way of doing it. But you kind of you never get to a point where you're like, this is the way I'm going to do this forever. I think you just can continue to kind of grow and develop in that way. Maybe one more thing I would say is you go to therapy. There are lots of reasons why people go to therapy, and sometimes they're struggling with something, but you could go to have an experience of therapy, and
Hmm.
you could go to think about why you're interested in this work. And a really good way to explore what it's like to in a way to work as a therapist is to go and get some therapy as a client, because you'll be in
Yeah.
therapy then.
Yes, of course.
You'll be in a room with a therapist.
What would you say to anybody who's thinking of coming in and beginning the training?
Um, I think it's more about you than it is about the client. How you become a successful and a competent therapist, how you excel at what you do is by working on yourself. It's looking at yourself, it's looking at your blind spots, looking at your triggers, looking at your journey, and holding yourself as an important part of that relationship with
Mm.
other. And if
Mm.
you don't have that very grounded, solid relationship with yourself, you can easily burn out. And it's so easy to burn out in this profession, and that those signs and those warning signs can be so subtle at first, but they're incremental. And I think when you're first starting out, and
Mm.
people are very anxious to start getting clients, and they've got one client, they've got two, and why aren't more coming? And I want more. It's learning about limitations.
Mm.
There's a limit to how many clients we can serve. There's a
Mm.
limit to what we can do within each of those therapeutic relationships. There's a limit to how many hours, we can work in a week. And typically where people are in a career transition, they're trying to juggle all the responsibilities of the career that they're in,
Mm.
with the training, which is extensive, and the written work, which is extensive, and all of the boxes that we need to tick, our personal therapy and,
Mm.
client hours and all of that. Um, I think it's very easy to have unrealistic expectations about what is possible, and everybody wants to go quicker. And I always say slow and steady wins the race. I think it's about being thorough,
Mm.
and there's something about that. There's, not rushing through the training, not rushing through those early client experiences, taking the learning from it, and of course, good supervision
Mm.
is essential to have that relationship with your supervisor, and to honestly take all of your concerns and worries and stresses, and to look at that. And we continue to grow through the process of good supervision.
Having a focus,
Mhm.
so really understanding who you are and what you're putting out to the world. And I think the big concept that I quite like promoting, letting people know, is keep investing in friendships. I
Mm.
think the value of friendship sometimes can be underrated. I think as a therapist, when you're very much one to one,
Yeah.
making sure you're connected with friends and your friendships allows you to constantly keep learning about the world, but also having people who are giving you feedback and telling you when, you know, they think there's something that you need to address in yourself. You know, because it can be quite an isolating world. Make sure you still stay connected with the wider world at all times.
Yeah.
When I was fresh out of uni, I did the things that I thought were the right decisions at that time. And then, you know, stayed in the job because I thought it was the right decision. And I wanted to be able to get married and buy a house and have children. You know, so all those decisions were the right things then, but they don't change whether counselling is the right or wrong thing for me to do now. So I think it's really important to not hold on to your past too much and ignore those positive feelings and signs you've got for something different just because it's, you know, doesn't build on or work on what you've done before. And it might not be seen as career progression, you know, or a route to earning more money or more status or something. So that one was a real big one for me.
Anybody coming into the profession and training as therapists, a lot of people that listen to this will be thinking about doing that or be on that journey or partway through that journey. Is there any advice you'd give to them?
Right. Continue having therapy yourself. I think that, and consult. Have good supervisors that you can consult with. This can be quite a lonely profession, therapy. It's the reason why soon after qualifying, I think I've been working even just, I think it was part-time. Yeah, I was probably doing part-time in those days. I joined an amateur dramatic society back in 2003, I think it was. Yeah, because I've done my 20 years now. Because I knew if I'm going to be self-employed, I'm going to be alone a lot of the time. And the people that I meet on a daily basis cannot be my friends. And that's going to hurt. Because there's a fair chance that if you train as a therapist, it's because you like people, that you're a people person. And so being a therapist can genuinely be quite lonely. There are other therapists in your area. Join a peer support group. If there isn't one, start one up. Because face-to-face is maybe I'm 47 now, so the idea of only chatting to people online just isn't enough for me. Maybe it is for some younger therapists. I know there are plenty of youngsters who go, I don't need to see my friends face-to-face. You do what works for you. But for a lot of people, if it needs to be face-to-face, you find a peer support group. You become friends with those characters. They're probably nice people too. They're therapists. Join whatever groups they've got going on. Get to know people. Keep in touch with existing friends. Really important. And I mean, we don't always have a choice if we're going into work into agencies, but if you're going into private practice, you can monitor your own time. You decide what days you work, what nights, what evenings you work, what weekends, if any, you're going to work, whether you go in on a bank holiday. You decide on those things. And if it works for you, then do it. If there's any resentment at all about doing those things, then do not do it. You do not want to resent a client because it's 6 o'clock at night and they think you want to see clients at 6 o'clock, but secretly you don't. If you don't do it.
I would say do your research on courses and things like that, and make sure that you're kind of aware, maybe give a bit of a read up on what's happening in the profession so you're aware of what your course is and where you might find yourself when you qualify, but also, you know, really think about well, I'd say that I did integrative training and I don't know, maybe I just kind of fell into it, but you know, be aware of what it is that really makes a difference to you as a person. So yeah, maybe think about how am I as a holistic person? You know, what do I have to offer? What life experience do I have? But what do I know about myself in terms of other things and what it means to be a human being? And I think that's a rolling question. What on earth does it mean to be a human being? You know,
and it can change over time as well, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that we really need to be clued into that. Here I am on this earth. Why am I here? What matters to me? What makes me me? What makes me human? Or maybe I feel that I'm interconnected with nature, something that I feel actually.
Me too.
So how does that
how do I make sense of that? And how might that even be useful within the room as well, without putting my stuff on the client, but, just in terms of being able to think together. Yeah. Yeah. It's a wonderful profession, because we don't be right. This is my advice. Sorry, it's taken away. Don't be someone who just goes and does your qualification and goes, oh, lovely, I've got a master's in psychotherapy. And now I just work and I don't ever think about anything. And, I just do my 30 hours of CPD that I have to do to get it ticked off. And I only listen to what my supervisor says. Be a creative person, be a creative therapist, be a living human being, be a human being in the room. As a therapist.
Become interested in therapy and everything like that. But there was still a lot of anxiety about it. And I would say perhaps the biggest thing was worrying about people's perception of why, thinking, well, why would you want to be a counsellor? And I suspect a lot of it, and I think I did this myself, I kind of went in with the sort of disguise on of I want to go in and help people, that's something virtuous to sort of do. And what I discovered is actually most people are there because they struggled with things themselves. They've maybe had help themselves, and they feel that they can maybe continue that and help other people. So another thing I quickly realised was that I didn't have to pretend to have it all together and be this sort of stable presence that could help everyone. What you were saying about all these different modalities and which direction can you take, an interesting bit of research that I've heard, which is what you've said, which is it's fundamentally it's about the relationship and the rapport you're going to have with someone. And while all these other things are important, they aren't actually very useful unless you've got that connection with somebody else. So, the way I'm trying to help myself with that is saying, look, go out and learn all this stuff, but if it's getting too much or it feels like everybody else is more academic than you, that's okay, because you can keep coming back to this central idea, which is about sitting down, you and another human being, and talking. I mean, that's what it is at its core, isn't it?
Number 7, which was a massive one for me, you cannot mitigate all the risk, dangers and unknowns. I'm very risk averse, always have been. So I think in my mind, I thought, well, I can do this retraining as long as I can work out how it's going to not cost me any money, not have any risk, not take loads of time up. And obviously that's completely impossible. So I had to get to the point where I said, well, it's going to be risky. It's going to cost some money and it's going to take a lot of time and energy. And that's just par for the course. Am I happy to take those risks? And I think I made my peace with that quite quickly. It was just that overarching question of accepting that there's going to be some risk there. And I can mitigate some of it by doing some research and make sure I go to the right institution and set the groundwork with my wife and my family and make them aware of what's going to be. So there's lots of things you can do. But then I think you just have to get to the point where you jump and go for it anyway.
What advice would you give anybody coming into the profession or going through their training at the moment? Is there any advice you give?
The first thing that comes up for me is do your own work and make it a practice, an ongoing practice, I think, of that self-reflection and that coming in and that being your own regulated nervous system. I think that's the most important thing to do as a therapist, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and are there particular things that you do on a sort of daily basis as part of your routine that will do that for you?
Yeah, well, meditation or mindfulness in the morning.
Okay.
Being out in nature does it for me.
Me too.
I'm very lucky. I've got a dog who just is adorable, and even stroking and having him around in my life is helpful. Friendships, community, fun.
Yeah.
Like laughter, some practice where you just have a bit of joy in your life, because sometimes I'm going to be honest, whether you've got a caseload of 15 or 20, there has to be so much self-care in that.
Yeah.
to retain yourself, because it's not easy work, but the work that we do is also life-changing for us because of the post-traumatic growth that we get, because of the vicarious kind of healing that we get through it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is that lesson to be present, to be authentic. I think the working in palliative care for me is, I suppose it's easy to say it's life-changing, but it genuinely has been. From walking through the front door of the hospice on the first day of my placement, thinking, for goodness sake, how am I going to get through this? To actually finally getting a job at the same hospice and becoming the therapist there for over 10 years and loving it, absolutely loving it. Well, it's a fantastic profession. Best thing I ever did by miles. I suppose if I had a message to anyone who was considering doing it, it would be, this will probably be the most beautiful, fantastic thing you could do with your life.
Yeah.
But it's a huge commitment, because you, like with any of the other therapies, you're actually committing to a life of service, which is what we do, and sort of giving our work time, often our thinking and development time, in any way that we can, in order to help people who are struggling. And that's a big commitment. And so just to be aware of that.
Is there any advice you would give people coming into the profession?
There are so many different programs now. I think it's important to find a program that you click with, actually. Yeah. Some programs are obviously more suited to some people than others. I did my doctorate at Metanoia Institute.
Okay.
And they had a program that was very much like I wanted. I looked around at them, at what kind of courses they taught, what their philosophy was. I spoke to a lot of people that, asked online to talk to people and other colleagues that I knew who'd been trained there for either as undergraduates or master's level or doctorate. And so I checked it out as much as I could. There are different modalities as well to the different training institutions. So I think there's a need to kind of look at what the modality is and whether you think that you're comfortable with it. There's quite a lot of information about modalities now in the world. So you could read a book about what kinds of things are available for. And of course, the different modalities are only ways of kind of making sense of what you're going to learn. So I always see them as the outside of a puzzle. The modalities are the outside of the puzzle, so that when you learn something, you have a place to plug it in. If you don't have a kind of understanding of a basic modality that you click with, then you don't have anywhere to put the information, and it gets very confusing in your brain. I mean, that's the integrative element of the whole thing, that you find your own heuristic, your own way of understanding, but integrating different elements, different ways of thinking about things. And you build those tools, those skills, those ways of knowing as you go through your career. I don't know about all training, but I think they usually pick just a few things to teach you. And that's the rock that you stand on then to go out into the world, interact with people, and learn more. And most of the therapists, the large majority of therapists that I know, are always learning, always growing, reading, doing CPD, workshops, and getting into lots of different types of supervision groups. Generally, JP, this profession has given me so much in my own life. It's been such an enjoyable career. It's tough. And there are lots of times where I curse the fact that I've done this. But most of the time, I see it as a massive gift to me that I stepped into this world. It's exciting, it's creative. I think as a therapist, the two things that you really, really need are curiosity and courage. And it's courage as well when you're with a person. Cool. And you're kind of in a relationship, and it's very intense and very intimate, and you're supposed to be the one who kind of facilitates the container in which they can do what it is that they need to do in order to grow and change. So that sometimes takes an enormous amount of courage, because it's you and them, you know. So it's been a fantastic career.
I think therapy is much less a profession than a calling and a way of life.
Sure.
It becomes fundamentally who you are.
Would you recommend it as a profession then, generally, for people thinking about it?
I can think of no more rewarding profession. It's breathtaking when you're able to meet people at depth and to make a difference. I mean, don't come into psychotherapy because you want to heal people. That won't work. The fundamental best driver to become a psychotherapist is because I want to sort myself out. Once I've sorted myself, at least I've got an idea of how I'm going to do this. Then you can share the journey with others. Not that you bring your own story into it. I probably do, in my case, probably tell my clients too much about myself. But fundamentally, there's a very good quote from a colleague of mine in the EMDR world, Mark Dworkin, who describes it like this: the builder has his tools, the painter has his brushes, the mechanic has his spanner, and the psychotherapist has his self. It is the relationship ultimately that heals.